Today, we're breaking down 7 performances that weren't bad, just praised way beyond what was actually on screen. These are 7 of the most overrated performances in film history. Let's get into it. Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, Darkest Hour, 2017. There's a certain kind of performance the Oscars can't resist, the kind where an actor disappears under 40 pounds of makeup, a historically recognizable accent, and a role everyone already considers important. Gary Oldman's Winston Churchill sits at the top of that list. And before anything else, let's say it clearly. The performance isn't bad, not at all. But the level of acclaim it received, sweeping every award from BAFTA to the Academy, says more about the industry's obsession with physical transformation than the internal complexity of the work itself. Yes, Oldman's rendition is undeniably entertaining. He growls, he mutters, he stomps around dark hallways like a bulldog who learned politics from theater training. But what he delivers is closer to an impression of Churchill than a full psychological excavation. And that matters, because the closer a role gets to pure mimicry, the more the audience tends to applaud accuracy rather than insight. Compare it to Brendan Gleeson's Churchill, which was built on the emotional contradiction of a man torn between ego, fear, brilliance, and insecurity. Or Stephen Dillon's lean, cerebral take, which captures Churchill's sharpness without drowning in caricature. Against those, Oldman's version feels polished, loud, and Oscar-calibrated. The real problem here is the film around him. Darkest Hour frames Churchill as a tension-free icon, a man who enters every room with destiny swirling around him like fog from a smoke machine. The script is built out of tidy monologues, quotable speeches, and the infamous tube scene.
So, this is the underground!
Watching that moment of pure historical fantasy makes Churchill seem like a cross between a motivational coach and a mythic folk hero. It's cinematic, sure, but authentic, not even close. And that brings us back to why this performance is overrated. Oldman wasn't awarded for the layers he found. He was awarded for the layers glued onto his face. Hollywood loves transformation because it's tangible, it photographs well, and voters can literally see the effort. That's the same phenomenon we'll hit later on our list with Rami Malek, where external accuracy was substituted for emotional depth, and again with Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, where intensity was mistaken for complexity. So yes, Oldman is good, just not sweep every award on earth, good. But in a year dominated by prosthetics, prestige, and historical momentum, that was more than enough. And he's not the only actor whose performance felt engineered for awards. Gwyneth Paltrow as Viola de Lesseps, Shakespeare in Love, 1998. If there's one performance that perfectly captures the phrase Oscar, campaigning over craft, it's Gwyneth Paltrow in Shakespeare in Love. And again, because this series is about honesty, not cheap shots, she was not bad in the role. She's charming, she's luminous, she's entirely believable as the romantic center of a playful Renaissance fantasy. But a Best Actress win in one of the most stacked years in that category, that's where things slide from performance into politics. First up, let's say the quiet part out loud. This Oscar was won in boardrooms, not on screen. Harvey Weinstein, at the height of his awards season manipulation, treated Shakespeare in Love like a military campaign. Aggressive screeners, relentless press events, targeted smear tactics toward competing films. It was the blueprint for modern Oscar warfare, and Paltrow became the face of it. On screen, Viola de Lesseps isn't a role built for deep transformation. She's a romantic lead in a clever, airy, genre-blending comedy. Paltrow plays her with sincerity and emotional clarity. Still, the role doesn't demand the kind of internal strain, dramatic weight, or full-body metamorphosis usually associated with a Best Actress win. It's light, it's sweet, it's well-delivered, but it's not monumental, especially not when placed next to Cate Blanchett in Elizabeth, a performance that defined her career and reshaped the biopic genre. Blanchett delivered volcanic ambition, fear, growth, and myth-making all at once. Paltrow delivered something lovely but comparatively soft. This isn't a knock on Paltrow's talent, it's a knock on the scale of recognition relative to the difficulty and impact of the role. And that matters because Oscars aren't just awards, they rewrite film history. They decide what gets remembered and what gets overshadowed. What makes this performance overrated isn't that Paltrow failed, it's that she succeeded in a year where someone else achieved something far greater. And this pattern doesn't end here. We'll circle back to it with Meryl Streep's win for The Iron Lady, where again the machine, different players, same strategy, mattered as much as the work itself. Award bodies have always been vulnerable to narrative, sentiment, and campaign pressure. Paltrow's win is simply the purest example. So yes, she was exceptional, but the Oscar wasn't reacting to the performance. It was reacting to the campaign, the story, and the machinery roaring behind her. And yet somehow, this isn't the most confusing Oscar win in our lineup. Meryl Streep as Margaret Thatcher, The Iron Lady, 2012. There are two truths you have to hold at the same time when talking about Meryl Streep's Oscar for the Iron Lady. First, she is one of the greatest actors to have graced a camera. Second, this particular win was more about legacy than performance. And yes, that can be true even for Meryl Streep. Let's start with the positives, because they're undeniable. Streep's technical precision is extraordinary. She nails Thatcher's sharp, clipped voice. The posture is immaculate. The physicality is studied and exact. This is the kind of role Streep can do better than almost anyone. Mimicry, elevated into craft. You look at her and see Margaret Thatcher, or at least the pop culture image of her, not Meryl Streep in a wig. But that's also the problem. It's an immaculate impression, not a deeply dimensional character study. And the film around her doesn't help. The Iron Lady is unfocused, strangely sentimental, and structurally confused, jumping between Thatcher's peak political years and her late life struggles. Instead of giving Streep emotional terrain to explore, it gives her fragments, isolated moments, beautifully acted, but never adding up to a complete, complex interior life. This is the exact opposite of what we see in genuinely towering biopic performances. Think Viola Davis in The Help during the same award cycle, who built an entire human being from silence, grief, and social pressure, or Michelle Williams as Marilyn Monroe the year before, who internalized rather than impersonated. Those performances dig beneath the skin. The Iron Lady applies the skin and never lets us under it. So why did Streep win? Well, it's because Streep is Streep. At this stage in her career, every transformation she attempts arrives pre-inflated. Voters see the prosthetics, the accent, the gravitas, and they react as if witnessing another monumental achievement. The award becomes about reputation, about it's been a while, and about honoring the institution that is Meryl Streep. And this ties directly back to Paltrow's win in Shakespeare in Love, but with a twist. Paltrow benefited from Weinstein's campaign machine. Streep benefited from her icon status. They both arrived at the same outcome, an award that overshoots the performance, but a different type of Hollywood power drove both. So yes, I agree that Streep is a legend, but this particular Oscar wasn't about greatness on screen, it was about legacy. And sometimes, the Academy votes for the symbol instead of the work. But still, with all we've said, even Streep has nothing on the next example of overrated acclaim Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, 1994. Let's get this out of the way immediately. Tom Hanks is a great actor, and his work in Forrest Gump is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. He's charming, gentle, committed, and fully locked into the character. And if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know we rate Hank very highly, especially in our 7 level of actors video. So this isn't a takedown of Tom Hanks, it's a critique of how inflated the cultural response to this performance became. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The emotion people remember from Forrest Gump comes from the script, the music, and the nostalgia, not from the depth of the performance itself. Hanks plays Gump with sincerity, but the role is written to be a vessel. The character doesn't evolve, doesn't reveal layers, and never makes choices in the way complex protagonists do. He experiences big historical events, he doesn't drive them. He's carried along by the plot, and the movie handles every emotional beat with sweeping strings, cultural references, slow motion montages, and dramatic framing. Those tools create the emotional impact, not the acting. Meanwhile, look at the performances Hanks was up against that year. John Travolta in Pulp Fiction reinvented himself and reshaped 90s cinema. Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption delivered one of the most grounded, quietly devastating performances ever nominated. Nigel Hawthorne in The Madness of King George gave a far more intricate portrayal of mental deterioration. These roles required internal conflict, transformation, and psychological nuance. Hanks, on the other hand, was playing a symbolic figure, the sentimental heart of a mythologized America. And that myth-making is precisely why the performance became so over-celebrated. Forrest Gump wasn't just a movie, it became a cultural event, a patriotic comfort blanket, and a nostalgic fantasy of innocence. That aura bled into how people judged Hanks' work. There's also the timing. By 1994, Hanks was at the center of a Hollywood love affair. He had just won the Oscar the year prior for Philadelphia. He was the face of mainstream American cinema. His win for Forrest Gump feels less like recognition of a complex acting achievement and more like a coronation. The Academy cementing him as the era's defining star. And when you place this next to someone like the performance coming up next, the contrast becomes obvious. One performance is sentimental, the other is technical but category confusing. Both won. Both sparked debate, but for different reasons. Hanks did his job well. The question is whether the movie did most of the work for him. Dustin Hoffman as Raymond Babbitt, Rain Man, 1988. Dustin Hoffman's performance in Rain Man is iconic. No debate there. It's instantly recognizable. endlessly referenced, and technically precise. But the question we're exploring in this script isn't, was it good? It's whether the level of acclaim, the Oscar win, and the cultural halo around it match what the performance truly deserved. And once you break the movie down, things get complicated. The biggest issue? Category confusion. People often assume Hoffman is the lead simply because the movie is called Rain Man and he's playing the most visibly acting-heavy role. But structurally, narratively, and emotionally, the film is about Charlie Babbitt, Tom Cruise's character. He's the one with the character arc, the emotional evolution, and the transformation. Hoffman's Raymond is a catalyst, not the protagonist. Raymond doesn't change, Charlie does. Yet, Hoffman won Best Actor instead of Supporting Actor, which is where the role actually fits. This is the classic Academy pattern. Reward the louder, showier performance, even if the story belongs to someone else. Reddit debate, film scholars, and even Hoffman himself have acknowledged it. Raymond's autism makes the role technically demanding, but not thematically central. Cruise carried the narrative burden and got 0 awards momentum for it, and this ties directly into a larger issue with Oscar voting. They reward mimicry, difficulty, and surface transformation over internal storytelling. It's the same phenomenon we mentioned with Gary Oldman and soon Rami Malek. The Academy loves performances where the challenge is visible. Hoffman's work is extremely controlled. Yes, but the control becomes a performance. There's little emotional arc because the character isn't written to have one. Then there's the career factor. By 1988, Hoffman was already a Hollywood titan. His win wasn't just for Rain Man, it was a symbolic acknowledgement of his legacy. This mirrors Streep's Thatcher win and Hanks's Forrest Gump coronation. The Academy wasn't just judging a single role, but decades of prestige attached to the name. So, if compared to Tom Hanks's sentimental win, Hoffman's is the flip side. Technical difficulty instead of emotional resonance. Compared to Anthony Hopkins' category confusion in The Silence of the Lambs, where he won lead for 16 minutes of screen time, Hoffman's situation shows how easily acting awards drift away from narrative centrality and toward spectacle. And let me iterate my point again. Hoffman is excellent, but that Oscar, that was about visibility, difficulty, and reputation. Not fit, not balance, and definitely not the story itself. But at least Hoffman acted. The next performance is practically impersonation. 6. Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury, Bohemian Rhapsody, 2018. Here's the thing about Rami Malek's Freddie Mercury. It's a good performance wrapped inside a deeply mediocre movie, elevated by nostalgia, editing, and the sheer emotional power of Freddie's legacy. That's not Malek's fault. He committed hard, he trained, and he studied Freddie's physicality. But when we're talking about whether the Oscar-level acclaim matches the actual performance, the answer gets a lot murkier. At the center of this discussion is the mimicry trap. Malek's movement work is impressive, but so much of what people praised came down to what looked difficult rather than what was dramatically deep. The prosthetic teeth, the recreations of concerts, the perfectly imitated gestures, they're all surface achievements. Technical skill, absolutely, but emotional transformation, interior complexity, that's where the performance has limits, largely because the film never gives him the material to go deeper, and the movie itself doesn't help. Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the most sanitized, aggressively edited, structurally confused biopics in recent memory. The emotional beats rarely land because the script refuses to sit still long enough to explore Freddie as a person. Scenes are cut around Malek rather than through him. His acting becomes part of the editing rhythm, not the other way around. And when the Live Aid sequence arrives, it's electrifying. Notice anything? It's a near shot-for-shot recreation of something Freddie himself already made iconic. It's thrilling, but it's not new, and the performance relies heavily on lip-syncing rather than vocal embodiment. This ties directly back to the Gary Oldman story, the Academy's recurring weakness for transformation as craft. Oldman had prosthetics. Malek had teeth and editing. Both roles turned authenticity into visible effort, and the Oscars love visible effort. It's the formula. Famous figure plus surface transformation plus mythic aura, automatic awards momentum, and guess who's probably going to get an Oscar in 2027? Pattern isn't subtle, because when voters can see the work, they'll reward it. And then there's the emotional association. Malek benefits enormously from Freddie Mercury's cultural significance. The tragedy of his life, the magnitude of his music, and the collective affection people already feel for him. That affection raises the performance. It's impossible to separate the audience's love for Queen from the critical reception of the acting. Imagine what's going to happen when it's the king of pop's turn. Malek is good, sometimes very good, but the legend of Freddie did a lot of the heavy lifting. In the end, Malek's Oscar wasn't just for his acting. It was for nostalgia, recreation, and the Academy's ongoing love affair with biopic mimicry. But the final pick isn't about mimicry, it's about a happy ending. 7. Robert Downey Jr. as Louis Strauss, Oppenheimer, 2023. Robert Downey Jr.'s win for Oppenheimer sits at a fascinating crossroads of craft, narrative, and industry sentiment. And it's that last one that ultimately inflated the acclaim far beyond what the performance itself delivers. Let's make this clear up front. RDJ is excellent in the film. His Strauss is precise, contained, quietly venomous, and calculated in a way we rarely see from him post-Marvel era. It's a sharp, grounded performance that proves, as if anyone doubted it, that Downey is capable of real, dramatic control when working with a director who demands it. But is it best supporting actor level work? Or was it a perfect storm of timing, legacy narrative, and cultural goodwill? That's where the conversation gets interesting. A huge part of this win wasn't about the performance, it was about the story around it. Downey positioned this role as his return to real acting, a reclaiming of artistic credibility after a decade of Tony Stark overshadowing everything else. Hollywood loves a redemption arc, and RDJ already embodies the ultimate comeback story in his personal life. Add the fact that he'd been publicly discussing his anxieties about Marvel typecasting, and suddenly, voters weren't just awarding the acting, they were awarding the symbolism of Downey coming home to prestige cinema. By the way, we've talked about Hollywood's bad habit of typecasting in our Stages of Hollywood Career video. Do try to check it out. Now, back to this video. Another factor behind the overhype is Christopher Nolan. When Oppenheimer became a cultural phenomenon, Nolan's entire ensemble rose with the tide. The film's success amplified Downey's already strong notices into career-best hyperbole. But compared to subtle, equally controlled, supporting performances that didn't get anywhere near this level of hysteria, Mark Rylance in Bridge of Spies, Michael Stuhlbarg in Call Me By Your Name, or even Benicio del Toro's work in Traffic, you realize how much of Downey's acclaim was tied to the enormous gravitational pull of Oppenheimer as an event. And this is where the pattern resurfaces, just like Oldman, just like Streep. When a beloved, legendary actor steps into a role that signals seriousness, the Academy inflates the work through cultural sentiment. The performance becomes secondary to the narrative about the performer. Again, don't get me wrong, Downey is outstanding, arguably the best he's been in years, but the award was for the comeback mythos, the Nolan aura, and the industry's affection for RDJ as a person just as much as the acting. A strong performance? Absolutely. A historically over-celebrated one? Without question. Like we had explained at the start of the video, none of the performances we've talked about is bad. Far from it. Every actor on this list delivered committed, often impressive work. The real conversation isn't about talent, it's about proportion, about how award season machinery, cultural nostalgia, transformation bias, and narrative momentum can inflate certain roles until they're treated as untouchable, while equally powerful performances barely make a ripple. These 7 cases share one thing: the disconnect between the level of acclaim and the actual depth or complexity of the work. Sometimes prosthetics did the heavy lifting. Sometimes mimicry trumped emotional exploration. Sometimes the story around the actor became bigger than the performance itself. And none of that cancels the craft, but it does explain the myth-making. Overrated isn't code for undeserving. It's a reminder that the industry's loudest celebrations aren't always its fairest ones. And exploring that doesn't diminish the actors, it deepens the discussion around how we judge art in the first place. Now it's your turn. Which performance do you think Hollywood has put on too high a pedestal? Drop your picks in the comments, argue your case, and if you want more breakdowns like this, hit follow, because we've got plenty more film analysis coming.